Now, those of you who've been following a few of my videos know that I have a lot of contempt for the physical therapy profession, and you really can't blame me. Most clinics are seeing multiple patients at a time. Therapists continue to keep taking patients back who cannot be resolved. There are so many problems in modern day physical therapy. That's what's inspired me to actually start this channel. And who I'm really targeting are the younger therapists because honestly, my generation is lost. The graduating class that I came out of in 1999, as well as other classes approximately in that era, we have blown it. We have created an environment in physical therapy where the bad clinic is actually the norm. The unethical clinic is the norm. And I'm seeing more and more on the blogs and forums of young therapists that are leaving the field regardless of their immense debt because they can't take another day of it. Now, part of the reason this channel was to call these types of therapists and clinics out. It's the least I could do after fighting with it for 25 years, as I'm largely retired now. But the other purpose of the channel is to help these younger graduates and new graduates have a positive experience in physical therapy. Because guess what? I did. I practiced one-on-one with patients the entire 25 years that I practiced ethically, I practiced morally. So I can go to my grave saying that, and the fact is most therapists can't today. And one of the ways you can accomplish this is to become a travel therapist or an independent contractor. And I have an approximate 60-page guidebook on how to accomplish this as a travel therapist and how to convert to an independent contractor, thus showing that you can make a lot of money and be ethical at the same time, because I did. And you don't have to buy my guidebook. I really don't need the money. As I said, I'm early retired. Because I'm creating a playlist that basically goes chapter by chapter of this guidebook, so either way you can have the information. If you look at my playlist, you'll have it for free. Now, I've already made one video on why you may or may not want to become a travel therapist, the ins, the outs, the pros, the cons. And I also made a video on how to decipher what's a good travel company and what's a good recruiter. And the purpose of today's video is going to be how to interview to find these good clinics and not get snowed. Because I did get snowed in my earlier days because I didn't know what questions to ask or I didn't know the follow-up questions to find out whether they were lying to me or not. And a lot of these directors were, and I ended up losing contracts in my early years of travel therapy. Now, I'd put together a video earlier that encompassed all the genres of physical therapy, home health, inpatient, outpatient, and I found that the video was far too long, so I'm actually going to create a playlist within a playlist on how to interview for specific genres in physical therapy, and today's will be just the outpatient. And I can tell you right now, most outpatient clinics are seeing multiple patients at a time. And if you're a therapist who's going to do this, just get off my channel. Don't buy my book, don't subscribe, I don't need your business, I don't want your attention. You go off and just keep being an unethical therapist like the vast majority. This is for the minority of physical therapists who want to practice ethically and how to do so in the travel world. Because unfortunately, a lot of directors and a lot of managers will lie to you in the interview because they're going to count on peer pressure to make you conform once you get there. Most people will not stand up for anything in today's world, and that's probably the way it's been since the dawn of man. So I'm going to give you my 25 years of experience on how to interview with these companies and how to tell if they're trying to snow you. I don't contract much today. Like I said, I'm pretty much mostly retired. I only take contracts when I feel like it, and usually it's to places that I already know about in remote Alaska. But there was a lot of wading through muddy waters in my earlier days because I was new in the profession and I didn't know what to ask. So here's how you make sure that the facility you're interviewing with is a good and ethical facility. Now, at the opening of the interview, they're going to give you the history of the facility, the background, etc. You politely listen to that. None of that really matters to me. I don't care about the background of their facility. I don't care how modern their machines are. What I care about is their ethics. And the first thing I'm going to ask them is, do you see patients one-on-one? And usually the good directors will open with this, because the therapists who are practicing ethically know that the majority aren't, and they want to entice you to come to their clinic because they know they have a good clinic. But that's the first question I'm going to ask. Are you seeing patients one-on-one? If they're not seeing patients one-on-one, that's pretty much going to be the end of the interview with me. But there's also caveats to the answers of these questions, because many of these directors will try to give you the impression that they're seeing them one-on-one when they're really not. So this is going to lead to my next question. Are you using aides or techs to do the treatments? Other words, unlicensed personnel, not a physical therapy assistant, which I'll talk about in just a few minutes. An unlicensed therapist should not be doing treatments with patients. Even though this is legal in most states under direct supervision, whether it be eyesight or sometimes hearing distance. They are shelling out a lot of money for the insurance companies. The patient deserves to have a licensed person, whether an assistant or licensed physical therapist. So if the answer is yes, we are using techs to do treatments, and then they're going to tell you about how great their techs are, doesn't matter, that's going to be the end of the interview with me again. But then there's another question you have to ask to find out whether the facility's trying to snow you or not. But then you ask, how many patients are you seeing a day, and what is the length of the sessions? Because I'm not going to go to any clinic unless they're at least 45-minute sessions, and usually I see them for about an hour. And this is where a lot of you are going to say, well, my God, there's only a few clinics that actually match your ethical standards. Exactly. That's why this profession is completely corrupt. But they're out there, and a lot of times they're out there in the Northwest and Alaska because generally those people tend to be better people. Your patients are your neighbors down the street, and they want to take care of them. And they're also usually community-run hospitals. The conglomerates usually practice unethically, pretty much widespread across the nation. But if they're answering me that we see patients one-on-one, our sessions are at least 45 minutes, we don't use aides or techs for treatments, then you got a pretty good facility. But there's something else you need to inquire about. It's really not an ethical issue, but it's more of a personal treatment style issue. And that's the use of physical therapy assistants. Now understand, I have nothing against assistants. I respect assistants. I understand their education level. I understand that they're licensed personnel too. I don't have this superior God complex toward them. And in my early days, I used assistants quite a bit because honestly, I was newer in the outpatient setting, so I didn't know a lot. Because everybody's got to be new day one. But as I started taking courses, I took John Barnes, I took Maitland, I've self-taught myself in Mulligan, and I've studied a great deal independently with the Sarman method. And what I'm generally doing is I'm mixing these philosophies. I'm doing manual, I'm doing specific, very targeted exercises, and I can't teach all that to a physical therapy assistant, so I don't use them very much. A lot of the places I work have a combo of inpatient and outpatient because they're small facilities in remote Alaska. So I'll use a physical therapy assistant for inpatient and post-op patients many times. But about 80% of the patients I won't give to an assistant. And this needs to be tweaked in the interview as well. There's nothing wrong with using assistants, but it depends on what your style of treatment is. But if you're not planning to use a lot of assistants, you need to go over that in the interview. Because a lot of these facilities have a PT-PTA team concept, and if you're not using an assistant, then they're not really going to have much to do. And that's going to cause a great deal of contention in the facility. So all that needs to be addressed in the interview process before you get there. And this is another caveat. Some facilities are so desperate for therapists that they'll go ahead and tell you that you can practice according to your style of ethics and treatment philosophy, even though everybody else there isn't. Because if they can't get somebody into their facility, then they're losing money weekly. And it's a lot of money. So they figure at least somebody bringing in some money, even though they don't agree with their style, is better than nobody at all. But here's the problem with that. Let's say you're the only therapist there that's not using aides for treatment and everybody else is. You're going to have a contentious relationship with the office manager. Because I would not count on the fact that the director you just interviewed with a week ago is going to inform the office manager of your ethical standards. You're going to get there and the office manager is going to start scheduling patients just like they do for every therapist there. And then you're going to be the one who's going to have to tell that person, no, I'm not seeing patients with techs. No, I'm not overlapping patients. And immediately you're going to create a hostile environment. Regardless of what they tell you in the interview, I promise that's what's going to happen. And also, you're going to cause contention with the other therapists there, even though you may be in the right. You have to remember that every other therapist there has a note they have to write for all the patients under their umbrella, whether they're the ones seeing them or not. Which means when one of your patients doesn't show up, you're going to have the opportunity to catch up on notes or just take a breather, and they're not going to have that luxury. And that's going to cause ill feeling. Now, I have a very thick layer of skin. I can walk into a room where everyone hates my guts and I just don't care. But you know what? After about 25 years, I'm actually tired of explaining ethics to therapists that should know better. So I just don't take those contracts whether they tell me I can practice the way I want or not. The contracts I'm going to take is where everybody is practicing ethically, so there's no contention. So now you got a contract you're interested in where they are going to see patients one-on-one. Those sessions are going to be about 45 minutes. They understand whether you're going to use physical therapy assistants or not, if they have assistants in the facility at all. The last question you really got to ask about is the paperwork, because some of these software systems are god-awful. And that's okay, you can use a god-awful system as long as the facility gives you time to do the paperwork. Like I was in a facility in Alaska with a terrific director, and it would literally take about 45 minutes to type up an eval, so she would give about an hour for every eval that you completed to do the paperwork. And that extra 15 minutes you could do a couple daily notes. And the daily notes only took about 5 minutes, so I could do them at the end of the hour session. And progress notes and discharges I would usually do as patients canceled throughout the day. Completely fair system, but you have to ask about this because some of these facilities want you to type up an evaluation while you're seeing the patient. And I can promise you, if you do that, you're going to do a very poor evaluation because there's not time. Or you'll do a very brief starter evaluation and you'll just catch up in later sessions. But for me, I'm not typing up an evaluation while I'm seeing a patient because one, I can't really keep focused on what I'm trying to figure out while I'm typing at the laptop, and two, it really annoys the patient. So you ask the facility about their software system, you ask them how long it takes on average to type up an eval, a discharge, a progress note, and you ask them what their cancellation or no-show rate usually is. That way you'll know if you have time through the day to complete the paperwork. Because what happens if they don't give you time to do the paperwork, they're going to count on the fact that you don't want to make waves with your travel company and you'll end up doing it on your off time. Well, you do make waves if they're trying to make you work without paying you. Now, I'm going to go ahead and give you an example interview that I had about 15 years ago in the outpatient setting where I caught this lady trying to snow me. This example comes right from my book on the chapter on how to interview facilities. It was an outpatient clinic in Anchorage. The lady had about 15 years experience in the field. After she gave me the history of the facility and all that basic introductory stuff, I asked her point blank, do you see patients one-on-one? That was the first question I asked. She said, yes, we do. Okay, you've got my interest, so the next question I ask is how many patients are you scheduling a day? In which she said, well, that varies day to day. That is a red flag. There should be clear, concise answers of what their scheduling process is. I said, okay, so give me an average. She said, well, some days it can be 8 or 9 and some days it's 15. In which I followed that answer with another follow-up question. Okay, is that 15 patients scheduled a day and then you have no-shows and cancellations that's bringing the number down? Or is it some days that you schedule 8 or 9 and some days you schedule 15? In which she says, no, we schedule 15 a day. In which I asked, okay, how long are the sessions? She said 45 minutes. Now do the math on that. If you have 15 scheduled patients a day and even 12 of them show up, you can't possibly get them in without overlapping them or using techs or aides. She had already told me they don't use aides, which means the therapist is overlapping patients. So by now I'm pretty much sure that I'm not going to work for this clinic, but I went ahead and continued on with the interview. I asked him, does that number decrease in terms of patients being scheduled if you have evaluations that day? And she said, well, we try to lighten the day when you have new evals. That is another red flag. Whenever a director says we try, that usually means it is not accomplished. Now, she had told me we have 45-minute sessions, 15 patients scheduled, and in that 15 patients can be evaluations, discharges, and progress notes. So I asked her, well, what would your typical treatment session be like? In which she brightens up immediately and says, oh, well, we would warm them up, then we'd have them go through their treatment session, and then we put E-stim on them because we want the patient to leave the clinic feeling good. Now, those of you who know anything know that E-stim is largely a useless modality. It's something that I use maybe to calm a muscle down in the every great once in a while. It's a modality that was being used largely by old therapists and now isn't being used by young or old therapists that much because it really doesn't do anything for resolution of pain. But it is a great way to get your notes done while you're seeing these overlapping patients now, isn't it? So that was the final nail in the coffin where I'm not going to work for this facility. But I went ahead and added one more question, probably because I was in a little bit of a snarky mood for her wasting my time. And I asked her, so what's your manual approach? She gets really quiet for a second and says, well, what do you mean? I'm like, your manual approach. Are you Maitland? Are you Mulliganite? Do you do John Barnes? What's your philosophy for manual therapy? She gets quiet again and says, well, we palpate the landmarks and such, if that's what you mean. She has no idea what I mean. She has no idea what I mean because she's never used manual therapy in her entire professional life of 15 years because she has spent that 15 years running an assembly line mill. What she's doing is she has one patient on the news step while another patient is doing their exercises or on the TheraBand, or she has two patients in the clinic and one of them's finishing up on E-stim. And she's sitting there with some sort of peripheral supervision while she's on her laptop trying to catch up on notes, including evaluation, discharge, and progress notes. Because that's the only way she could get that amount of patients done for that amount of time in the course of an 8-hour day. She's running a clinic that, yes, is acting legally, but certainly isn't acting ethically. But did you see how I used that funneling down of questions to determine whether she was trying to snow me or not? Because remember, in the beginning, she said, yes, we see patients one-on-one, and that's a complete fabrication. They see patients for a portion of the time one-on-one, and it's probably a very small portion because she's sitting there constantly trying to catch up on her laptop with notes as she's trying to funnel 2 patients at a time throughout the day. So you take that funnel of the questions I just gave you at the beginning of this video, and then you funnel down and can zoom in whether a clinic's ethical or not. And the other way that you can tell that a director or manager is trying to snow you is many times on these Zoom conferences, the other therapists will be there as well. And when they start looking away from the camera as you're asking these questions, it means they're probably trying to snow you. Or when you ask a question and they keep redirecting away from the question to try to tell you about the finer points of the facility. Because I can promise the other therapists on the Zoom aren't going to raise their hand and point out that the director is flat out lying to you, as was the case with this woman I interviewed in Anchorage. So that's how you figure out whether an outpatient clinic is a good or bad facility. And I'll have more videos on how to interview for inpatient and home health as well. And you can also take this structure of inquiries and use them to interview for a permanent job. And I'll be talking about in a future video on how to solidify a contract. So if the clinic did snow you, you will have evidence that they did and be able to leave with no repercussions. So I hope this helps you younger therapists out there, especially those of you who are new to the travel world. I practiced physical therapy ethically one-on-one with patients my entire career. My last clinical instructor on my final internship told me I wouldn't last a year in the field, but yet here I am. Now I know there's going to be a temptation to take these very high-paying contracts because you have this tremendous debt on your shoulders, especially if you're newly graduated. Now sometimes you can get these very high-paying contracts because of the nature of the remoteness of the facility, but most of the time that's because they're seeing 3 and 4 patients at a time. Listen to me, you can still make a lot of money and knock that debt down within a few years and still practice ethically. Use my techniques during the interview process, find good facilities to work for, have a good time in physical therapy, and practice ethically. What I want you all to do is turn this profession into one where the unethical therapist is the exception and not the rule that it is today.